Welcome back to our lecture series on international trade for UG Economics under NEP 2020. I am Dr. Arun Kumar Nandi, Associate Professor of Economics at Chakdaha College, University of Kolkata. In the previous lecture, we discussed the scope of international economics and the concepts of trade and arbitrage. Today, we move to the analytical foundation of trade theory. We will study two important tools, the Production Possibility Frontier or PPF and the Community Indifference Curve or CIC. These tools help us understand how an economy decides what to produce, what to consume, and how equilibrium is determined in a closed economy. This framework is essential before we move to comparative advantage and gains from trade. Let us begin. To understand international trade clearly, we must first understand how an economy functions without trade, that is, in a closed economy. To simplify our analysis, we assume a closed economy. That means only two goods are produced, good X and good Y. Resources are fixed, technology is given, and there is full employment and there is no international trade. Under these assumptions, we try to determine the equilibrium production and consumption combination. This equilibrium is called autarky equilibrium. Let us first examine the production side of the economy. The production possibility frontier or PPF shows the maximum possible combinations of two goods that an economy can produce using its available resources and technology. It represents the production constraint and it reflects scarcity because resources are limited. If the economy wants to produce more of good X, it must sacrifice some quantity of good Y. Now, let us understand the shape of the production possibility frontier. The PPF is typically downward sloping and concave to the origin. Why downward sloping? Because production of more of one good requires sacrificing the other. And why concave? Because of increasing opportunity cost. Resources are not perfectly adaptable. As we move resources from production of Y to production of X, less suitable resources are used. So the sacrifice increases. That is increasing opportunity cost. To measure this trade-off more precisely, we use a concept that is called MRT. We will discuss it later. Before drawing the production possibility frontier, we must understand where it comes from. The production possibility frontier is derived from the contract curve in the Edgeworth box diagram. In the production Edgeworth box, we allocate two factors, labor and capital. On the horizontal axis labor and the vertical axis capital, we measure, and it has two origin for x good and another side for y good. The contract curve represents this one, all efficient allocation of labor and capital between the two goods. At each point on the contract curve, the marginal rate of technical substitution, that is the rate at which labor substitutes capital, is equal in both industries. This condition ensures production efficiency. Now, each point on the contract curve corresponds to a particular level of output of good X and good Y. If we take this output combination and plot them in the output space on the right side diagram, we obtain the production possibility frontier. Therefore, the production possibility frontier is simply the locus of output combinations derived from the efficient factorial allocation along with the contract curve. The meaning is that the contract curve shows all combination of labor and capital that fully utilize resources, existing resources, and it ensures production efficiency. And do not allow reallocation to increase output of one good without reducing the other. Thus, it represents efficient production points. Each point on the contract curve gives a specific allocation of factors corresponding output of good X and good Y. If we plot these output combination in output space, we obtain the production possibility frontier. This one. Basically, it is the contract curve plotted in a output space. Now, let us turn into the slope of PPF. The slope of the PPF is called the marginal rate of transformation. The marginal MRT, that is marginal rate of transformation, measures the rate at which one good must be sacrificed to produce one additional unit of the other good. In simple words, marginal rate of transformation is equal to the opportunity cost. If MRT, that is marginal rate of transformation, that is the slope of production possibility curve, and its value equal to 2, it means producing one more unit of X requires sacrificing 2 units of y. Let us now examine the graphical representation carefully. Now let us discuss an important concept, that is the shift in the production possibility frontier. So far we have assumed fixed resources, labor and capital, and given technology. But in reality, economies grow over time. When the production capacity of the economy increases, the PPF, that is production possibility frontier, shifts outward. There are several reasons why this happens. First, technological improvement. If new technology allows firms to produce more output with the same resources, the maximum possible combination of goods increase. As a result, the entire production possibility frontier shifts, that is PPF shifts outward. Second, increase in resources. If the labor force increases, or if the economy accumulates more capital, such as machine and infrastructure, production capacity expands. This also leads to an outward shift of the PPF, production possibility frontier. So, due to increase in resources, production possibility frontier also shift. Third, improvement in human capital. What it actually means? That means better education, training, and skill development increase labor productivity. More productive workers can produce more output, which again shifts the production possibility frontier outward. Now, it is important to understand that growth may not affect both goods equally. This is very important. That is, biased growth affects shape of production possibility frontier differently. If technological improvement occurs only in the production of good X, then the production possibility frontier will shift more towards the X-axis. This is called biased growth. Now that we have understood the production side through the PPF, let us move to the consumption side of the economy. This brings us to the concept of community indifference curve. The community indifference curve, that is CIC, represents the social preferences of the economy. It shows different combination of two goods that provides the same level of social welfare. In other words, every point on a given CIC, that means community indifference curve, gives equal satisfaction to society. Point A, for example, point A and B on CIC 1. If we move to a higher indifference curve, welfare increases. So higher community indifference curve means higher social welfare. While the production possibility frontier shows that the economy can produce, whereas the community indifference curve shows what society prefers to consume. Now let us examine the properties of this community indifference curve. To understand how preference behave, we must look at the shape of community indifference curve. The CIC, that means community indifference curve, has three main properties. First, it is downward sloping, because if society consumes more of X, it must consume less of Y to remain on the same welfare level. Second, it is convex to the origin due to diminishing marginal rate of substitution. Third, higher curves indicates higher levels of welfare. Now, to understand the slope of community indifference curve, we introduce another important concept, that is marginal rate of substitution, MRS. The slope of the community indifference curve is called marginal rate of substitution, or MRS. MRS measures the rate at which society is willing to substitute one good for another without changing its level of welfare. For example, if MRS equals 2, society is willing to give up 2 units of good Y to obtain 1 additional unit of good X. It is important to distinguish this from marginal rate of transformation, that is MRT. So MRS is the slope of community indifference curve, whereas MRT is the slope of production possibility frontier. MRT represents opportunity cost from the production side. On the other hand, MRS represents willingness to substitute from the consumption side. Thus, production decisions depend on marginal rate of transformation, while consumption decisions depend on marginal rate of substitution. Now, depending on the type of goods, CIC, that means community indifference curve, can take different shapes. Let us briefly look at the different types of indifference curve. Indifference curves can take different shape depending on the nature of goods. First, perfect substitutes. In this case, the curve is straight line. The marginal rate of substitution remains constant. For example, two identical brands of bottled water. Second, perfect complements. In this case, the curve is L-shaped. Goods are consumed in fixed proportion. For example, left and right shows. Third, imperfect substitutes. This is the most realistic case. The curve is convex to the origin and reflecting diminishing marginal rate of substitution. In international economics, we generally assume imperfect substitutes. Now that we understand both production and consumption separately, we combine them. Let us now bring together PPF and CIC to determine equilibrium. The production possibility frontier represents the production possibilities of the economy. What the economy can produce. On the other hand, the community indifference curve represents consumption preferences, what society wants to consume. For equilibrium to occur, production and consumption decisions must be consistent. That means the economy must produce exactly what society prefers to consume at that point. So, where does this happen? The answer lies in the tangency condition. In a closed economy, equilibrium occurs at the point where the production possibility frontier, that is PPF, is tangent to the highest attainable community indifference curve. At this tangency point, the slope of PPF equals the slope of CIC. In other words, MRT equals MRS. This is the equilibrium condition. It means that the rate at which the economy can transform one good into another equals to the rate at which society is willing to substitute between them. At this point, production is efficient and consumption is also efficient, and welfare is maximized. This is called autarky equilibrium. Now, let us interpret the tangency diagram more carefully. This is the diagram. These are the community indifference curve, CIC1, CIC2, and CIC3. And this one is the production possibility frontier. We measure two goods, good X on the horizontal axis and good Y on the vertical axis. And E is the tangency point where slope of production possibility frontier equal to the slope of community indifference curve. In this diagram, we see the PPF and the CIC touching each other at point E, and so E is the equilibrium point. At this tangency point, MRT equals MRS, and no reallocation of resources can increase welfare without reducing production efficiency. Therefore, this point represents the production efficiency and as well as consumption efficiency. And at this point, maximum social welfare is achieved. This is the optimal point in a closed economy. But what does this tell us about prices? At equilibrium, the slope of PPF equals the relative price ratio of the two goods. Since the slope of the PPF equals MRT and MRT equals opportunity cost, we can say autarky relative price equals opportunity cost. This means domestic price, relative price, reflect the underlying production cost of goods. And here lies the key insight for international trade. What happens if two countries have different opportunity cost? If two countries have different production possibility frontier slopes, their opportunity cost differ. If opportunity costs differ, their autarky equilibrium, autarky relative prices will also differ. When relative prices differ between countries, trade becomes beneficial. Each country can specialize in producing the goods. Each country can specialize in producing the good in which it has lower opportunity cost. Thus, differences in production possibility frontier slopes create the basis for comparative advantage. And this is how the production possibility frontier and the community indifference curve framework, PPF CIC framework, leads to directly international trade theory. Let us now summarize what we have learned today. Today, we discussed the analytical foundation of trade theory. We understood the concept of production possibility frontier and how it represents scarcity and opportunity cost. We have also learned about the community indifference curve and how it reflects social preferences and welfare. We saw that equilibrium in a closed economy occurs where MRT equals MRS, that is, marginal rate of transformation equals marginal rate of substitution. At this point, autarky relative price equals opportunity cost. This framework forms the foundation for understanding comparative advantage and gains from trade. In the next lecture, we will expand our analysis and we will extend and this analysis to two countries and formally introduce the theory of comparative advantage. Thank you. Please review the diagrams carefully as they are extremely important for examination and for understanding trade theory.